speakers today did not send me a bio to read, but I met Craig last year at the chamber to coordinate the holiday train schedule with everything that's happening downtown, and met with him again this year. And love the passion for what they're doing. It's really awesome. And so I'm not going to say anymore. I'm going to invite them up here to tell us all about it. So come on up.
Is this a speaker? Okay.
Right there. Great.
Well, I might use this table.
Okay.
When she said coordinate railroad schedules, she didn't mean with Amtrak. She meant with the toy trains at the library. And that too. And with and the Masonic Village Railroad Club cooperates with us. So I'm going to introduce Fran Strauss to you. Many of you already know Fran. And we've been at this for quite some years in terms of cooperating with displays in town. And also we go back even more time because as kids, we each got a train set as a little guy. So how many in here got a train set when they were a little kid and enjoyed the heck out of it? So there you go. So that's part of the mystique of this thing. Fran and I have worked on programs like this before, and he's got a slideshow. So let's start out with the history of model railroading, and if you'll take us through that, I might chime in a little bit. And if any of you have questions as we go along, please ask them as they occur to you.
Well, obviously, railroading or model railroading actually started way back in the 1800s. And many of those were the wind-up type of locomotive that most companies had. Some of the pictures might depict that type of locomotive. A little bit later in the century, Markland, which obviously is a German company, but they first released their model, which worked again off the clockwork, which was turning the handle, winding the train or locomotive up, and then off it went. A company by the name of Carlisle and Finch then developed the first electric trains that ran on a metal track. This was their first attempt at that. Then we come to the early part of the 1900s, and companies that we all probably know, Lionel, starts developing model trains. I think, Craig, did you bring along a few actual ones? But these are what's commonly referred to as standard gauge. They were the large locomotive and train set that usually went with a Victorian type of a living room.
This is an example of an O-gauge set that a child might have gotten this as a Christmas gift in the mid to late 1920s. And I'm going to put it out up here. You're welcome to come up and take a look at it. But it's pretty rudimentary even compared to the models shown on that slide up there. I'm going to throw out the name of one other company that Fran didn't mention. There was a company called Whedon that made a little live steam engine called the Whedon Dart. It had a little tub of alcohol in it with a wick. You would light the wick, and it would boil the water in the engine, and it would take off. Now, the interesting thing was that there was no throttle and no brake on the thing. So if you let it run wild, it eventually would fly off the track, spill the burning alcohol on Mom's carpet, and it became a very unpopular toy.
Well, advancing in the 1900s, we come to American Flyer, which is another name that hopefully many of you are familiar with. We often think of the S gauge with American Flyer. Again, you've got large scale, which is the standard gauge. And then a little bit smaller than that, you come to the O gauge, which is the typical line L. And then below that is the S gauge, which was, again, typical for American Flyer. Yes, go ahead.
Do the O and S mean anything?
I don't think that.
They do. The O is synonymous with what the Europeans used to call zero gauge. And these gauges simply represent the distance between the running rails. So O is about 1.25 inches. S is about 75% of that. And you can keep going down the scale with HO, N scale, which is 9 millimeters. And the littlest one I know about is Z scale. That's German word for 6 starts with Z, so that's a 6 millimeter scale. So those toys are quite tiny. I would not recommend it for anybody that wears glasses or contacts.
But typically, the O gauge was a 3-rail, whereas the S gauge was a 2-rail. Okay, moving on into the 30s, we now come to, as we were talking earlier here, about O scale, but then we come into HO, which is half of O. HO stands for half of O. So that became very popular. Again, you had the Victorian type of living room with a big standard gauge to fill that with a tall Christmas tree. Then as homes became a little bit smaller, then you obviously you're talking about getting into the O gauge along with S gauge. Then as we continue to get smaller in our homes, we now come to HO, or half of O. So we are taking advantage of the model railroading, but yet at a smaller scale.
And this is an example of what Line L started to do in the 30s in terms of making cars a little bit more realistic and a little bit more colorful, because often the moms who helped pick a train set as a gift were attracted if the things were a little more colorful. And I'll send this around so you can take a little closer look at it.
Again, what Craig is showing is typically what we call pre-war, or it's World War II is always a standard, I guess, in terms of model railroading. Is it either pre-war or is it post-war? And during, obviously, World War II, these companies did not produce trains, but produced a lot of gauges and other things that went into aircraft. So even though they weren't producing model railroad locomotives and other features to that, they were obviously engaged in the war effort and producing through their technology various instruments or other things that benefited the effort.
The second car I started around here with Ralph is an example of what would have been typical of the teens, the 19-teens, and the very early 1920s. So you can see a difference just between these two cars in terms of manufacturing capabilities and techniques. And as the story goes on, we'll show you some newer things as well.
Okay, and then we come to the golden age of trains, and that's the 50s, which many of us here probably did get our first train in the 50s. But in the 50s, trains became the #1 toy for boys in particular, but also there was a girls' train that Line L produced as well, and that had various types of creative coloring to that.
Well, it had a pink steam engine, pastel freight cars. and the truth is, the girls didn't even like it, so it was a very horrible seller. And what happened to a lot of those sets is the cars got thrown out, and the dealers would take the engines and spray paint them black so they were more realistic. And consequently, if you find an original Line L girls train with all its original colors and packaging, they're quite valuable.
Likewise, in the 50s, we come to the plastic era. And so many of the cars that Craig has shown you are actually metal or tin. But now cars are made out of plastic, less expensive, and also lighter, much, much lighter. So now you can really put a lot of cars on the track, and the locomotive can power those. And we come into the 60s, and as Craig was saying, we're now HO, but now we're coming down to N, about like that. Okay, so if you come out to Masonic Village and their train club, they actually have a N gauge layout. That's again, as Craig's saying, you must have some really good eyesight and a lot of patience to operate that type of train. Got anything there, Craig, for us?
Yeah, I'm going to do a little overlap with the first part and the second part of the presentation. The overlap is that this is a project that the train guys have done at the library in terms of producing cars that represent local businesses. And then we've sold those to generate some income for the library. And Claire, I'm sorry I didn't know you would be here today, or I'd have bought a car that he sponsored for Baum's Bologna. It's one of our favorite ones. But as you can see, compared to the older metal cars, this is a newer plastic type, as was Claire's, and it's got a lot more detail and accuracy in terms of being a scale model. This one happens to have been done for B&G Lumber Company.
Okay, now I said we're kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller, but all of a sudden, in the late 60s, we're going big, and we're really going big. So now we come to G gauge, which is commonly referred to as the Garden Railroad locomotive. And many of those obviously are outdoor trains. But if you come to our layout, we've created the outdoors indoors. So we have a large area where we have the indoor-outdoor carpet, green carpet, and the G gauge trains operating there.
So is this what they have at Knoebels? Knoebels has an outdoor train.
Yes, they do. Right.
Kids can ride it.
Yeah, and again, there are those that are actually live steam.
Yeah.
They're like 15-inch gauge, and that many of amusement parks do have that type of train.
It's become popular in the last decade for arboretums to have an outdoor railroad display using G-scale trains, and quite often they will also incorporate buildings that are of local significance made out of all natural materials. They're interesting to see if you get a chance.
The tough thing about that, it's a lot of maintenance. So you have a vegetation or some types of vegetation that you plant for that scale, but all of a sudden, 2-3 years, it's like here, and you've got to continue to replace. And though those locomotives, you might have one that runs with track power, but that requires, again, a lot of cleaning and a lot of maintenance on the track. You probably, today's advancement in batteries, most of those types of G-gauge locomotives are battery operated. So you can just throw in that battery, run it for a couple hours, throw in another that you've recharged, and off it goes. So a lot of G-gauge train layouts in the county. Every October, the Model Railroading or the Strasburg Railroad and the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania have a Garden Railroad tour. Well, we're back to, again, small, and we're going smaller yet, as Craig was saying before, Z. And Z gauge typically is like a attaché case. And so it's self-contained usually. You're not building a layout. You're usually fixed with either a box or a attaché case or something of that nature to it. And then we come to today's era of everything is electronic, everything is digital. And most of our young individuals that are getting involved in trains, they don't want the trains that Craig and I have there. They want this train that is so real-like that they think it's actually something that's running on the Amtrak line or whatever. So we come to, I guess, our last slide, which is just a combination of trains to that. And today, it's estimated that we have 500,000 enthusiasts in model railroading.
Yeah, I'll share one more thing with you to show the progression of manufacturing. This is a standard gauge locomotive by Lionel from, again, the mid to late 1920s. It's supposed to be their model of an engine that New York Central actually used, an S1 electric. Now, come to the 1990s, and Lionel went back to that engine style, and they produced a true scale model. And that's what it looks like. Incredibly detailed, and again, full of a lot of electronic tricks that this older guy was never going to be capable of.
Question?
When does your display in the library open?
Well, we've got a special viewing for any of our emergency personnel. That's the Monday after Thanksgiving.
Thursday.
Right? Thursday?
Yeah.
After Thanksgiving.
November 30th, we open up. It's the same evening as the downtown tree lighting. And so the idea is that we're going to host first responders just because of what they do for the community. But then anybody else who's coming downtown for the tree lighting, we're hoping they'll come a little bit early, go through the train display, and then hit the tree lighting at 7 o'clock. We'll be open from 5:30 to 7 that evening. And I do have some schedule cards with me that I'll be happy to give you. If we need more, I'll get some to you through Denise or something.
Go ahead, Barry.
Mine was, I remember a tablet.
Oh, yes.
I don't even remember. I just remember this white thing.
Yeah.
What was that?
That's a smoking tablet. And we, being at the library, we had to learn early not to use those because it obviously set off the smoke detector. And then, of course, we had another problem. That was parents who had kind of like the backpack and the child in the back. And so as they're coming in to our entrance, there is the pool box, right?
For the fire.
And the little guy in the backpack is pulling that. And we had the fire company twice. And they said, once more, and we're fining you. So we invested in the plastic covers that go over the pool boxes. We haven't had a false alarm yet.
Thus the pre-show for the first responders.
Right, yeah.
Well, the big importance of that is if we have members of the fire company there and we've wired something incorrectly, they'll cover it.
Yes.
Are the digital ones the remote control? You hold it in your hand and everything operates from there. And do they have parts? Like I had a milk cart, and I think the milk cart came into a platform.
Correct.
And then loaded the cans of milk.
Correct.
The cans, no milk, cans. Anyway, do you have something like that digitally?
No, I'm not aware of anything but there is a different version. Again, they're not loading it; they're unloading the milk cans, and we do have a car that you can push a button, and that will energize the car, and the door will slide, and out the can will come out with the milkman.
And then the logs, a log car,
Right.
unloading and loading logs.
Yeah, if you come to our layout, you get to play with our trains.
Okay.
So there are 50 push buttons about every 2 feet, and that operates maybe an accessory. It may operate a train. It may operate some lights or whatever it may be. So that's one distinction we have versus others, is that you get the opportunity to play with our trains.
how much would a setup cost? Just one track, set a track, let's say 8 cars or something like that, digital. What would that cost?
Well, you're talking $1,000 for that type of engine.
Okay, just the engine.
Just the engine.
It sort of depends on where you want to get into the market. All these producers are smart enough to have different price points. So you can buy a starter set for somewhere between $250 and $400. And some of those may have a remote control thing to them. But then if you get into the hobby a little deeper and you want to invest in it, you can buy engines for $2,000, $2,500 and cars for $100 a piece if you want to. I don't have a lot of that stuff.
Yeah,
I know some people who do that.
Has a new series called Legacy, and that's all their whistles and bells and all the craziness that goes with digital electronic devices.
Another feature we have at the library display is that we always raffle off a new train set. So if you got a hankering to get back into this, come over and buy a couple raffle tickets and enjoy playing with the trains through there. Why don't we try to
through these
squeeze
quickly?
through this real quick?
You want to start with it, or do you want to?
Go ahead, keep going.
Well, again, we all started much like others in church Christmas bazaars. So for Craig and I, we were Church of the Brethren, and they gave us a small classroom. Next year we said, no, we got to have more space. Every year we kept trying to negotiate for more and more space. In fact, we just finally said, why don't we take over Fellowship Hall where you have Bazaar, and you take all your Bazaar classrooms throughout the church. That didn't go over too big. But in essence, the Christmas Bazaar has finally just faded out. And then those 2 or 3 churches that did have that train room, we got together and said, hey, let's do something for the community. So we started looking for a vacant storefront downtown. So that was our first attempt. Many of you remember Moose's 5 and 10? Oh boy. You remember the wooden floors that were there? Well, they weren't level. And so you try to put a train layout that requires level space on an uneven floor. So we had all kinds of wedges and things trying to make that. And then, of course, you remember the bank building, which now is actually the library, part of the library. That was also unique for us because we took over every space in the bank. We had a layout in the vault. We had a layout in the teller area. We had a layout in the front window. It was just whatever our creativity would be, and we did that. So as those buildings became our opportunity for expanding downtown, we finally obviously come to the construction of the library. And again, much like we had with our church situation, we were given a small conference room in the lower level. No, next year we need the large conference room in the second level. Next year it was both conference rooms in the second level. And now it's that and also the whole hallway for layout. So that's what our layout in the conference room area looks like. That's how detailed we, again, usually about the October 15th is move out. And when we say move out, we've got stuff that's in any old garage or any old space in church attics, whatever it may be. And we're fortunate enough that we get one of our real estate companies, sorry, Greg, I won't say the name, real estate companies who provides us with their truck, and we go around and collect all this stuff. And we move into the library. And to get everything exactly where we want, we actually have some engineering drawings, which is like this, and we've created some improvements in that in terms of how we put up a table with now PVC legs, and it's automatically leveled.
Just for perspective, if you look at that diagram, it's 18 feet wide and 65 feet long. So we're capable of running some pretty good sized trains.
Yeah, about 20 trains altogether at one time. So we also have some greeters. You might recognize some of these guys. So we try to, much like I'm dressed today, we try to be more of a interactive individual. So we're communicating or talking with guests as they come in. We try to give them as much information about model railroading, but also real railroading. Mike there is our resident hobo, railroad hobo, and I am there as the conductor.
How are you supported financially?
We asked for a $2 donation, but that doesn't go to us. We every year provide the opportunity for a donation to the library. It's usually about $10,000. Okay, and that is that $2 suggested door donation, as well as sometimes we have a raffle, train raffle. We have also some individual memorabilia items that we put out for sale. We also have had in the past that business car. So various sources of revenue. But all that revenue we don't put it in our pockets. We make it as a donation to the library.
We've been fortunate to have a couple of benefactors that have given us some money to help replace and buy equipment. And recently we've been able to sell some of our older track and get a little income that we can put towards equipment that way. But we're sort of operating on a shoestring budget and out of generosity of the people that participate. Dave, you had a question.
Yeah, just how many years has this program been at the library?
Well, I think the library opened just around 2000, something like that.
We're pretty close to 25 years on this.
Yeah, I think we're getting close to that. We also have any invitation we get. This happened to be Mill Road School when it was still open, and they invited us to come and use one of the classrooms and have an educational process. You may recognize this individual here, Barry Hassinger. Unfortunately, Barry is no longer with us, but he was very active in our train guys' activities. So here's that move in terms of the early part of the library. I'm just going to go quickly through it. Some of the faces you might recognize there. Again, as we said before, at the end of our holiday train display, we look at all the revenue and we provide a check then to the library. Some of the things that we have is, I mentioned about the 50 push buttons. Those boards there contain those, about every 2 feet is a button, and you can see how you have to get underneath and that's the other problem. We're getting too old. We try to get either the old creeper that mechanics use, or try to get younger guys.
That's correct.
So, we also have an actual model of the Harrisburg International Airport. We try to do that. A little bit of education with railroading and airports. I mentioned about the G gauge. That's our G gauge there. A little bit more of our O gauge, and here is that S gauge that we're talking about.
For you guys that are Lionel fans, some of our group went to visit a guy that strictly collected American Flyer 2-rail S gauge one time. And as he greeted us at the door, he brought us into his train room. He took an extra piece of rail and laid it down between the 2-rail track, right in the middle. And he said, "Now, are you guys happy?"
More of the G gauge layout there. Maybe Don Miller, anybody recognize Don there? You see, well, let me go back to this one. Here's what's commonly referred to as tubular track. Okay, this is what probably most of you are familiar with. Okay, It has its advantages, but also it's a pain in the neck. Lionel produces now fast track. So you have not only the track, but you have all the ties, you have all the ballast. So it's a complete realistic system. And it goes together real quick. So we try to replace a lot of the tubular with Lionel. A little bit more as Mark in working those buttons. We try to also bring in a lot of E-Town history. And how many of you are familiar with E-Town's only professional baseball team? Good. Well, this is replica of Klein's Chocolate professional baseball team and its field, which was just right over yonder. And we try to do that for about 12 other buildings that we have actually gotten pictures. We then scale those and build those to scale. We've also have a large train circus area and circus amusements and so forth to it. That's always interesting. We have moved that into the hallway, giving the opportunity for people to queue to wait to get in, but also while they're standing there queuing in, they get the opportunity to play with some of our amusements that we have. Yeah.
Just to get off the train subject a little bit.
Yeah.
E-Town field. I understand Babe Ruth played here one time?
Correct.
Okay.
Didn't quite play here, but he
Okay.
played Klein's. That game was up in City Island.
Okay.
Okay. But he was here.
And who won?
Klein's won 4-0. If you want to hear that story, I'll be glad to tell, because I did that story for the Baseball Hall of Fame. So anyway, back to trains. That's our schedule, but it's a little bit different. The library has condensed their overall time on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So we're a little bit constrained on those days, but we partner with the Masonic Village on Saturday. So there you can actually go and park out at the village and walk over to their train display, their train club, get on the shuttle, their shuttle, come into the library, see our layout, get back on the shuttle, and go back and get your car. We also had developed some games for kids. This is a find and seek type of puzzle of a railroad station. Again, some of our newer individuals and Deb, who is now leading the library. Craig showed you, this is the standard gauge, the largest. So we sometimes change things up on one portion of a layout. Sometimes we'll look at O gauge, sometimes we'll look at standard gauge, sometimes we'll look at S gauge. So we try to mix it up a little bit as far as that portion of the layout anyway. These are historic buildings. This is Klein's factory, Buick's manufacturing, the old freight station, Railroad Express freight station, the old fire station way up yonder. Right up there, fire station,
Old schoolhouse.
old schoolhouse. So we try to do that. Again, COVID kind of put a little bit of a crunch to us. We haven't built a new building since that time, but that always helps in being able to educate people about Elizabethtown. That Elizabethtown is more than just coming here and smelling the chocolate. Okay. I mentioned about the circus, so forth. This is an interesting feature that we developed. It's what we call the double helix. So the train, the single car, which is powered, goes up, 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 and then over, and then down, 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 and then back again. And we get a lot of comments about that. That's an engineering feat. Turntable and roundhouse. These are some of the, again, some of the standard gauge items. Hellgate Bridge, which was up there in New York City, the old power plant. So we try to bring in as many accessories and other items to enhance the overall layout. One of our big benefactors was Barry Keener. As you probably know, Barry had the train shop on the square. And Barry, every year, we would throw him the challenge. We would tell him that we're doing a special business car, Bounds Bologna, and we need not just one or two, but we need 100 of those cars, of those reefer refrigerated cars. So Barry would collect those for us, and then we had another individual up in Scranton that we had a partnership with who actually would strip the car, and then we would do all the graphics, and then that person would put the graphics on the car, so the car became a one-of-a-kind. So we did that every year, and I think we have about 15 of those, 15, 16 of those, Craig, that we did. And then, of course, COVID hit, and then our problem. But the last car that we were able to produce was actually B&G Lumber. I think, Craig, did you show them that?
That's
Car's going around. So we don't know whether we're going to get back into that business or not, but that did raise about $1,500
roughly
that went to the library. I got to show you this one. We also as an attraction, we also provide candy, chocolate candy, and we have a competition between Hershey and M&M Mars. This year, M&M Mars said we'll provide candy. So one day, a big truck pulls up to the library, and what do you got in there? Oh, we've got candy for the train guys. They had not this, but the bars like that, okay? And the whole truck filled with cartons of this, right? What happened was that it was supposed to go to Walmart, but they were like a fraction off in weight, and therefore they couldn't sell it to Walmart. So they thought this was a great idea. We're going to give it to the community, right? So we had tons of this stuff, and so we had to have some creative ideas, and so we did here. Every now and then we would say that you're the 1,000th visitor, and we gave them a big box of M&M or Milky Way. Okay, that's how we got rid of all those items. We also, I mentioned about the raffle. We had a train set. We do a raffle every year with that, and that raises money. But, hey, there you go, Claire. So those are some of the business cars, and you can see Claire's Bounds Bologna, as well as Matasivic's Christmas tree car, and Wenger, Hassinger Sit, Grub Supply, did one for the library. That up there is Heise's Quarry, and then we have Messick's down here, Klein's Chocolate, and then the Trop, we had one for that. Gross Meats had to be pink.
Yeah.
Pigs. It cannot be anything. Can't have spots on it. very, very, very demanding as to what type of pigs we were going to put in that pig car. So, and then Long and Acres Hatchery. This is actually an operating car. So when you open the door, all the chickens in here cackle.
And the little guy sweeps the chicken crap out of the car.
Right. Yeah, really. That's, yeah. There's the last ones there in terms of B&G lumber. So there we are.
There's a question back here.
Well, I'll throw a challenge. So our Rotary Club turns 100 in a couple of years.
Yes.
That would be a good time to bring back the business car.
We'd
Rotary 100th anniversary.
be glad to consider that. Yes.
We might be able to sell a bunch of them to Rotary people.
Is there, we run into a problem sometime with patent rights or certain.
You don't ask questions, you do, and you ask them, and you say, I'm sorry later.
Okay. So any Rotary logo or anything like that, we can just
Ask for forgiveness.
go ahead and do it.
We're allowed to use it. But yeah, we can figure all that stuff out for you.
And that would be just for Elizabethtown's Rotary?
Yeah, it's our 100th anniversary.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Got it. We're working on that. We'll work on it.
First off, you really guys don't have to know much about training. I'm an HO guy, and I have been since the 60s. And HO stands for half the cost of an OB, but twice the fun. But I